everyone. Today we're gonna go over the brand new Votann. This has been a long time coming for me as a Votann player, and I'm sure lots of non-Votann players want to know what has changed with the army and what they can expect if they ever go against them. So, getting straight into it, what's new? There's a new army rule. Grudge tokens are gone, so no more plus one to hit, plus one to wound. No more getting tokens off of dead units, none of that, that's all gone. It's got a new yield point system where the army has to play the primary, so staying on objectives, to generate yield points, and for that they gain bonuses depending on how many points they have. We'll get into that in a bit. You can spend those yield points on stratagems, abilities, and enhancements. This way, it feels like GW have made an avenue to balance like 2 CP strats, where previously they'd have a 2 CP strat. Now they can say it'll be 1 CP and you spend an amount of yield points. This means that the controlling player has to balance two different resources, and it sort of skill locks really good stratagems in some ways. You also have 8 new data sheets, and the existing ones have been changed significantly to mesh well with the new army rule. The army rule itself, so at the start of battle, you get hostile acquisition, which means every unit gets +1 to hit against targets on objectives, and you can reroll advanced and charge rolls. So this is really good for setting up an early good game with a melee list. If you want to just be hyper aggressive and table your opponent with, a berserker list, which we'll get into that soon, really good for that. Or if you just want to bully armies like Kroot or Eldar, EC off the board quickly, take away their trading bits, and set up for the late game. So you generate your points by standing on objectives. So you gain 1 at the end of every command phase, so not just your own. And then past turn 2 or into round 2, you also gain yield points for controlling objectives. So it's 1 yield point for controlling objective, then it's another one for controlling your home, and another for controlling 2 and controlling more, etc. etc. It's a lot to track, I understand, but if you can master how to do it, it's super powerful, especially when you realize that yield points aren't just about getting your army rule, they're also a way to buff your units really well. If you have more than 7 yield points, everything in your army gets +1 to hit if they're standing on objective, and if it's not a vehicle, you get the -1 to wound if the attack strength is higher than your toughness. This is really powerful again. Votann have really weird breakpoints where our infantry are T5 and above, so unless someone has a T5 weapon, they're not going to be optimally wounding into us, especially if you have Fortify Takeover up. It would mean some of our units where the new carrier or maybe the new Steeljacks, they force your opponent to overcommit just to guarantee the kill. So detachment wise, there's a lot of reworks. The only thing I won't talk about is the Grotmus one, because that one is, in my opinion, defunct, and there's no reason to use it ever. Hopefully it gets a rework, but we'll see. So, getting into the Need Guard Oathband, which is the reworked index attachment. So, previously it gave you 4 judgment tokens at 2k. That's all gone, and it's changed into the yield point system. So, very simple detachment rule. Every time you kill a unit, you get a yield point. Nice and simple. It's a really offensive detachment, but it has some balanced defense as well with armor contempt and the classic shoot back for 2 CP. But in general, this is super aggressive, going for damage. You're not going to be playing the long game with this one. This is more about tabling your opponent and really threatening their units. So, combos in this, my favourite one is obviously Dead Reckoning with a strategist. So if they're standing on your home, they get an extra yield point from their ability, and if you don't spend a yield point in a turn, so this would be your opponent's and your own turn, you also gain another one, which means with that, top of turn 2, you'll be in Fortified Takeover, which is where you want to be. You don't want to be below 7, because that way your opponent gets to choose where you're going to apply your plus 1 to hit. If you're in Fortified Takeover, you get to choose which one of your units gets plus 1 to hit by standing on objectives. Really important to identify that and not fall into the trap of, oh, I can reroll charges in advance. That's very there's few moments in a game where you need to reroll a charge or reroll in advance, and a CP will just cover that normally anyway. This attachment is really balanced in a way where we'll look at the other ones, but it has a great inlet of yield points, and you can also spend them as fast as you gain them. Although in my test games you just get into an impossible surplus to spend, but I'll talk on that later in another video. For example, in this attachment you can get Sus 2 for a CP and some yield points, plus 2 AP in melee, plus 1 to wound. It's really, really good. The plus 1 to wound is based on enhancement, and it's still got the utility that you used in the index attachment. Pretty cool. The next one, Brandfast. This has been the talk since the leaks, since the reveal. It's got good infantry shooting output with sustain 1 if you're near a transport, and you got Sus 2 with an enhancement. Pretty cool. But the big thing is the strat, which is end of any phase. If any units from your army have hostile acquisition, which is below 7 yield points, you can spend a CP, choose a transport, and a unit inside that transport can disembark wholly within 6. Now, why is this good? It means you can advance the transport, drop out with this in the shooting phase, and then charge, which is an insane threat range. End of your opponent's fight phase, you can drop out units on an objective, wholly within 6, grab an objective, score it on your turn. Let's say you can even drop out in the command phase if you want. You can drop out units. Let's say you're going first, opponent has bottom of turn scoring, you just go, no, you don't get score more. It's an insane strat. It's probably going to get nerfed, but I'll talk out the downsides as it is right now. So you need to stay below 7 yield points. The problem is this attachment doesn't give you enough access to spend yield points, so you really have to sometimes sacrifice your primary so you don't get yield points, or you run a bunch of strategists, the new model, to tick down your yield point counter. It also means that because you're below 7, you don't get to choose what unit gets plus 1 to hit. Your opponent gets to choose that by placing their units on objectives. It also means you don't get the -1 to wound, which again, it's really big because the army rule and the data sheets, they're drawn as one. So when they make a book, they've considered that the -1 to wound will apply for about most of the game. It's a balancing act, and I can see how on the surface people will go, oh, this is really great, but you have to stay below 7 yield points. And let's say if you want to use this late in the game, turn 4, turn 5, you will really struggle because you either didn't score primary to stay on the 7, or you have and now you can't use the strat. Again, if you're running a big jail list or just a big turn 1 alpha strike, this is amazing. No contesting about that, but it's got downsides. So, next attachment, I mean, I'll be honest, this one doesn't have anything else to talk about other than this. Hearthfire Arsenal. It's really focusing on the new Steeljacks, the Brokir, the new Scientist, the new Strategist. It's got good yield point inlet, so you get lots of yield points by staying on objectives, and bonus on top. And also you get to use them in the shooting phase just to get reroll hit rolls of 1. So it's probably not that game changing, but it just means your bike's ready to get reroll once to hit, and so does the new Hecaton. Anything for scanner, so it just means you get that army wide, which is really nice. Big things, you can deep strike Thunderkin or Steeljacks for an enhancement, which is huge. It just means you essentially free up a transport slot. A lot of the units in this book move 5 inches or less, the infantry at least. So instead of filling up your transports to the brim, you can spend a few points and deep strike some of your Thunderkin or Steeljacks. Big thing here is Phantasm. So early in 10th, we had Phantasm for Eldar, and everyone hated it. It was an insane strat, and we essentially get this for the new Steeljacks. It's super powerful where it's end of your opponent's movement phase, and you can just have Steeljacks make a normal move. They do have to move as close as possible to the closest objective marker, which is probably what you want anyway. Your entire army revolves around objective markers. It's really great. You can deep strike 9 away or wrap it off the edge for CP. Then if you have Votann nearby, which I'll talk about later, you make the strat free, and now you moved, if you're on the board edge, you moved 6 off the board edge, and you're going to move 5 again, totaling about 11-inch move from a unit that just appeared. It's pretty nutty. It may get nerfed, same as the other one, but because it's only Steeljack specific, maybe it'll fly underneath the radar, and it can see some crafty players really abusing the strat. Next one, Persecution Prospect. This one is a bit. It's not got much to talk about in terms of the detachment rule. It's got this long paragraph where essentially, when you shoot something and you can only shoot at one target, you can't split fire. You assail it, which essentially marks it for this detachment's abilities. And if you do it again with another unit, it's pinned, which is the old Berserker Maul Launcher, where it subtracts 2 from move, characteristics, and charge as well. Not advance, which is big. I don't believe it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't work on monsters or vehicles. So if you want to use your assails against monsters or vehicles, you don't get that. There's an enhancement for it, but it doesn't feel good in my opinion. Highlights, it's got a flat 6 reactive move, which is, as always, really powerful. We see that with Custodes and Talons, and a bunch of other armies like Necrons, Canoptek Court. Reactive moves, super powerful, especially when they're flat 6 instead of d6. You have lots of access to rerolls, like full rerolls for Hernkin. You can get wound rerolls as well for other units if you assail and stuff. There's a flip back to under 7 yield points for a CP, which it's situational where you can spend as much yield point as you want to pick up friendly units. I can't see a situation where that can help, especially because most of our stuff like bikes comes off the board edge. If you really want to switch to under 7 yield points for some reason, I guess you have that. But Defender and bikes, so new transport or light vehicle, I suppose you would call it, really good in this. Otherwise, it's okay. There's going to be some lists where you'll see, they're going to top a tournament, and it's, I'm going to guess, probably off the reactive move and the rerolls. Into units, this is the big one. Thunderkin, they've changed their rule and their datasheet a little bit. So they've gone down from 3 wounds to 2 wounds. So if you want to keep them alive, you're going to have an Iron Master just to blank stuff on the ecogs. And in terms of weapons, so the Grav Cannon changed from D6 and Blast to 3 shots, but Anti-Monster 3 up and Anti-Vehicle 3 up. And it's got damage 3 now, which is nice, so it's a bit anti-elite. And you got the big one, which is the SP Conversion Beamer. So previously it was sustain hits on 4s, which is nice, but now it's 2 shots, Strength 7, AP 2, damage 3. So I believe it gained an AP pip, but I'll double check that. And it's got lethal hits. So if you combine that with the sustain hits that you can get in lots of detachments, now you got block of 6 would have 12 shots, lethals and sustained 1 or 2 on 4s, plenty of rerolls in the book. The amount of damage that this unit can output is ridiculous. They can pick up big knights, they can split fire and pick up 2 light vehicles, they can wipe out big blocks of elite infantry. Really good. They're really vital to the Codex as a whole because they give the army ignores cover against whatever they've shot. So scanners no longer ignore cover, they give you reroll once to hit. So you really want these guys at least 3 units minimum, just to appear somewhere, pop a few shots, strip cover, and then the rest of your army with the AP1 can actually do something. Again, must have, you're going to take 3 units of these, a 6-man in Need Guard, which is what I've been testing with an Iron Master with the +1 to wound enhancement. Gives you about, on average, I think 35 to 50 damage against the Big Knight, which is ridiculous, but it's sustained its 2, lethal hits, rerolling 1s to hit and wound, +1 to wound. It's really powerful. So definitely watch out for these guys. They're big damage. And now with the new transport changes, you can fit 6 of them in a land fort and an Iron Master, which, if they drop out, they're going to murder something. The land fort will kill something else. This is a shooting army through and throughout. Uthar, so big change here. He no longer has the change all damage to 1. He's got the classic 12-inch stratagem discount, which a bunch of other stuff has in the game, but the difference is he's dirt cheap for his cost, if you count that in. Most other units in the game, like Gulliman, the Hive Tyrant, they're pretty expensive compared to him. He still has the flip a dice to a 6, but this time it's a yield point, which is nice. I guess you can, spend a yield point, take out a Marine guaranteed. He also has the Rampart Crest, where he gives a unit 5-up invuln. Again, he's decent. You can run him solo, or you can run it with Hearthkin Warriors. You're not going to run with Hearthguard because they're terrible now, but decent. Every list is going to have this guy. Bury, the new guy, he's got an amazing set of tools we never had in the army, where, he's got Blood Surge, he's got Lone Op, he's got Stealth, he stands back up on a 2-up. He's 5 attacks, hitting on 2s, Strength 12, AP 3, Damage 3, and you can obviously buff the AP if you really need somebody dead. He's great. You're going to take him in most lists. He's expensive at 110, but obviously he gets back up on a 2-up with full wounds, so you can factor that in and maybe say, really he's about 55, 60 points if you roll your 2-ups. Who knows? I feel like you would have this in most lists. He's really nice to push up a flank, contest the middle objective, maybe your opponent's expansion, because he's hard to get rid of. No one wants to go near him. D6 plus 2 Blood Surge, and that melee profile is really rough to work around. People don't want to go near that, so he's just a great threat, and he gets back up. Decent. You can have him in most lists. The new Capricus Defender, it's really good. So the closest analog would be the Piranha. It's priced about the same stat line, sort of. T7, 4-up save, 7 wounds. He does have a better profile, in my opinion, than the Piranha. He can't spike as much, but he's got Fire and Fade D6. So the Piranha in town, for example, they'll push him up, they'll shoot at something, and they'll die in return. This guy will push up early game, he'll fire a couple shots, D6-inch move, so probably 1 inch because you're going to peek him out just a little bit. He'll walk behind a ruin again, and he'll keep repeating that until someone comes and deals with him. He does have a rail cannon, which is D3 plus 3 damage. It's 1 shot, so it's situational, but there's some metas, like right now, maybe if you really want that anti-vehicle, you can shove that in. But generally, the rotary cannon with flat damage 2, it meshes really well with the autocannon. It just means you can pick up those, those Scout Marine squads, the JPI squads, much easier. Again, it's really, really nice to have. I run 3 of them because they're 70 points a pop. It's decent. It's decent movement. With Scout 9, 12-inch move. It's, again, you could say you're giving up bring it down points, but who cares? You're going to run loads of transports anyway as Votann, so something to watch out for. These guys can be a nuisance. They'll play the early game, and even late game they can be really annoying with the Their survivability, they are T7, so someone has to overcommit. Normally, there's nothing in the game that can reliably kill a T7 model at 70 points, so they're going to be trading down. It's a nuisance. It's something to have, and I can see it in most lists, 100%. Next one, the melee steeljacks. 90 points, you get 3 man bodies of T6, 2 up save, 3 wounds. They're OC1, so not too much, but they're tough if you count the -1 to wound from the army rule. So now you have a T6 body, 2 up save, 3 wounds, with -1 to wound. So it's almost like the Wardens in Custodes, but without the Invuln. For 90 points, it's great. The melee output with the plasma swords it's comparable to 5 Hearthguard, and they're cheaper. So if you have spare space in a land fort, you'll shove through these guys in there, and they'll run out. They'll annoy something. They'll possibly cause desperate escape, and they can potentially precision out something if they need to. They're okay. I've shoved a few into my list just to fill out spots where I maybe don't want berserks. I want something a little bit tougher, just to contest the early game. Next one is the shooting variant. Same stat line, but with the Volkite Disintegrators, you're looking at approximately 36 shots with a 6-man, and then you can give it sustain hits if you want. Lots of flat damage one-shots. They overwatch on 4s and 5s, but generally on 4s because you're going to be above 7 wounds, or 7 yield points, apologies. And they also have dev wounds built in, which, if you look at the crest ability, means that any 6s on devs you can apply to characters. So you roll 36 dice against like a guard command squad and their little buddies. You'll get the perfect amount of precision dev wounds to kill off a character, and then you put the rest on the unit. Again, really powerful. With the new book and how datasheets have changed, there's a weird space where these guys are the only unit that can reliably take out hordes. The Thunderkin don't have blast weapons anymore. The Hearthguard don't have good grenade launchers anymore, so you really want a unit of these guys at least in case you go into a big horde matchup like GSC, Kroot, Guard, etc. Again, really good. They're really nice to just drop off a flank, look at something that's about to charge, and overwatch on 4s. Pretty decent. I'll take a unit of them any day. Weaknesses wise, like you'll see in the Codex, lots of stuff is AP1, which means you still need Thunderkin to strip cover. I'm not sure why this is the case. I feel like if they're going to remove the scanner ability, they should have at least bumped up the AP, because previously it was AP1 because we ignored cover. So again, Thunderkin are absolutely vital. The entire army relies on primary, and some missions, depending on what tournament pack you play, they don't value primary play as much. Like Scorched is really reliant on secondary play early game, and then you get into primary. So that's, I think, in itself a weakness, because it means this army gets really forced down a cone to play the primary game, even when they don't want to. Army-wide, they still on 4s, which is, it's hitting on 4s is okay, but for a shooting army, it does hurt. They have ways around it, but again, hitting on 4s, it's susceptible to smoke and stealth. The Searchlight, for example, on bikes ignores stealth now, or ignores mods, but still, it's rough to work around. Damage-wise, really high damage output, but without land forts and Thunderkin, the rest of your army doesn't have access to Possum to Wound, like before in the Index, so you're not going to have a unit of bikes take out a transport reliably. It's something to consider, and you should build your list considering that you're not going to have the same damage output. You're gonna have to dial everything back, and you really have to focus on your your big blobs, your big Death Stars of Thunderkin, maybe Steeljacks. If you want to run 10 Hearthguard or Land Forts, etc., you have to focus on your Death Stars. In terms of another weakness, melee pressure armies like World Eaters, for example, or EC, they can really bog this army down by just tying up key units, and then you can't maneuver and ignore cover, etc. So you have to spend not a decent chunk, but you have to spend 100, 200 points on just screens and stuff to stop you from getting tied up constantly. Datasheet wise, somewhat overcosted. I think Hearthguard for what they have now, we're at 135, is still pretty bad. And in terms of competitive detachment choice, you probably have the transport one. If the strat doesn't get nerfed, you have obviously the reworked index one, and you have the Hearthfire one. The Berserk one, which I didn't talk about, I'm going to talk about that in its own video. It's how do I explain it? It's got battle line berserks and it's got loads of shenanigans in terms of movement, but I think for the general population, it's just not going to be as effective. If you're a really competitive player and you know the ins and outs of the game and how to maneuver, having access to moving 8 inches, advancing and charging, and then piling in six with how berserkers are modeled physically, with the 50 mil base, can be super powerful. But for the average Joe, I don't think it's that good. So something to consider. Um, in terms of the rest of my videos, I have the Wraith video coming up next week, and then I got the Night video as well after that. I'm gonna shove in a bit more Votann videos leading up to the London Grand Tournament because I'll be taking them to that. And once lists are up and stuff, I'll talk through what I'm taking, and then I'll make probably a review video afterwards as well, and I'll talk through what issues I found with the army in a competitive sense. I do have a couple tournaments before that as well, so I can talk about stuff beforehand and just update people on how the army works competitive wise. I know some people don't have the ability to go to tournaments constantly and they can't experience stuff firsthand, so I know it's really nice just to have a resource and say, oh, okay, maybe on average, math-wise, this doesn't work as well, etc. Other than that, thank you for watching, guys. Your support means a lot. I'm gonna get pedal to the metal over the next month and just push out Votann stuff. And I'll talk to you guys really soon about it. Bye bye.